Hello, it's Marion from Wool Thread Paint. Today's little video tutorial is to show you how to make this crochet star. It's a standalone star which I'm using in a blanket pattern at the moment called the Cloud Cover Blanket. And in the pattern I use 4 of these stars and sew them down onto a plain granny square. So today I'm going to show you how to make the star. I'll just quickly bring in the square just to let you see it, and that's how it will look once it's sewn down. I'm working with James Seabrett Twinkle DK, which has got that nice sparkly strand going through it. This is in the colour silver, and of course, because it's DK weight, I'm working with a 4mm hook. And to start, I'm going to start with a chain 4. You will find lots of patterns for stars on the internet, and very often they'll say start with a magic ring, but that's not my preference. I always prefer to start with a chain 4. So I'm going to make a slip knot and put it onto my hook and chain 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then I'm going into the very first of these chains with my hook, pulling the yarn through and through the loop on the hook. That's a slip stitch, and that just makes a circle with a hole in the middle. And it's that hole in the middle that you're going to be working all your stitches for round 1 and 2. So the very first thing we need to do is a few chains, and that we're going to chain 3. And that chain 3 will be the equivalent of 1 treble stitch, which is the stitch we're going to be using. So it's 1, 2, 3. So that counts as a stitch. And then I'm going to make 14 treble crochet stitches into the center. Let me just say I'm working in UK terms for this tutorial. So if you're in the US, you'll need to convert. Treble crochet in UK terms is double crochet in US terms. So yarn over, put your hook into the center circle and pull up a loop, yarn over and pull through 2, and yarn over and pull through 2. That's a treble crochet stitch. That's number 1 of the 14, and I've got another 13 to put in. So that's 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. Now, just before I close up, it's always a good idea just to double check that you've got the right number. So the chain 3 counts as the first stitch. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. I've got one more to do. Just as well I checked, 15. So that's my round 1 finished, and what we need to do is close it, and to close it we're going to slip stitch into the very top of the first chain 3, put your hook in, pull the yarn through and back through the loop on the hook, and that is round 1. Now the circle in the middle is looking pretty big at the moment, but don't worry about that. I'll close that up when I'm finished the star. So the next thing we need to do is make the 5 points of the star, and this is really very simple. So I'm going to start by chaining 8, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So that's a nice long chain coming from that center, and we're going to work back down this chain, working into the individual chain stitches. So what we want to do to start with the first one is to count 1, 2 chains and then the third one, and we're going to put our first stitch into the third chain down. And this is going to be the smallest of the stitches. I'm just going to put this down for a minute because something has happened off the camera. I'll be back in a second. Sorry about that. Okay, so as I said, we're going to count 1, 2 and go into the third chain down, and this is the smallest of the stitches. It's a double crochet, and we just put the hook into the chain, grab the yarn and pull it through, and then yarn over and pull through the 2 loops, and that's a double crochet stitch. Remember, this is UK terms. Yarn over for the next one, and this time we're going to make a slightly bigger stitch. It's going to be a half treble. So it's yarn over into the next chain, yarn over and pull up your loop, and you've got 3 loops on the hook. Yarn over and pull through all 3. And I'm going to make another half treble stitch in the next chain, pull through all 3 loops. And then we're going to get slightly bigger again, and for the next chain I'm going to make a treble crochet stitch, which is yarn over, put your hook into the next chain, yarn over and pull up your loop, yarn over, and this time just pull through the first 2 loops, and then yarn over again and pull through the next 2. And I'll do that once more. So that is into the next chain, pull up your loop, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. Now we've got 1 chain left before we reach the circumference of round 1, and we're going to get bigger still. So this is going to be a treble crochet stitch. So that's yarn over twice, not treble, a double treble, my apologies. Let's do that again. Double treble. So that's yarn over twice. Put your hook into the very last chain, yarn over, pull up your loop, and now you can see you've got 4 loops sitting on the hook. Yarn over, pull through the first 2, you've got 3 loops. Yarn over, pull through the next 2 loops, and then yarn over and pull through the last 2 loops. And as you can see, that point has gone from being quite small to being quite broad at the base. Now to anchor that point and to make it fit onto the circle, we want to miss the next 2 chains, next 2 stitches, my apologies, and then we're going to slip stitch into the 3rd stitch along. And there you can see the point of the star. And I'll do that once more. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and double crochet into the 3rd chain from the hook, half treble in the next chain, half treble in the next chain, treble in the next chain, and treble in the next chain, and then double treble in the last chain. This does make quite a big star, but my granny squares that we're going to be sewing it onto are 7 round granny squares, so we want it to be quite big to fit into that larger square. Anchor it down, miss the 2 and slip stitch into the next one along. Now they curl up a little bit, but don't worry about that just now. And there you can see the first 2 points of the star. Now there's enough room for 3 more points, so I'm going to work round my 3 points, and I'll come back when we get to the point where we're finishing off the star shape. Here are my 5 points all finished, and I just need to slip stitch into the 3rd stitch along, like so, and then you can cut your yarn, but this time, because I'm going to be sewing this onto a background square, I'm going to leave a longer than normal length of yarn, and that's what I will be using to sew it on with. So I'll just pull that through and pull. And that's your star. Now it's looking very curly. Don't worry too much about that, because once it gets sewn down it will be nice and flat. But the first thing we need to do is to close up that center hole. So I'm just taking my needle and putting the yarn through it, and I'm going to work my needle through the loops of the first round without going through to the other side, of course. And I'll just go right round my circle like that, and then pull. There you go, that's it closed up and really nice and tightly. You need to anchor that by going back in a couple of stitches to stop it from pulling out. But that's the center tidied up. I can cut that short now. And that is my star. As I say, it's all very curly. You can use a little bit of steam over the top of it to flatten it out if you want to before you sew it down, or you can just go ahead and sew it. I have another one that has been sitting under a heavy weight. It happens to be my laptop just at the side here. This one, which is the one I will use to sew down, although my end on this one isn't particularly long. You want to have something more like that, but I'll use that to sew it down onto my square. And just before I finish with the stars, this is a little one, which is maybe a more, how would you say it? It's maybe a better star shape than the big one, but it's too small for my square. And that one is worked in exactly the same way. Instead of doing 8 chains, you just do 6, and you just do 1 double crochet, 1 half treble, 1 treble, and 1 double treble. And that is another version of the square. I mean, you can certainly do that one as well. Okay, actually, I think what I'll do is I'll take the one I've just made, because it's got the long tail, and I'm going to sew this down onto my square. Now, in my blanket, I decided I didn't want my, just to be a little bit quirky, I didn't want my star to sit straight on the square. I just gave it a little bit of a turn, so it was sitting at a jaunty angle. Basically, you want to kind of line up the center of your star with the center of the square, and you can put a couple of pins in if you like to hold it. I'll just start stitching as it is at the moment, just to let you see. So you take your long end and put it onto your needle, and all we're going to do is sort of what I call a stab stitch. And basically you just need to hold your point down, put your needle into the square, bring it through on the star, just go straight back in and come through again a little bit further along. Straight back in and through a little bit further along. There are spaces in the granny square which you kind of want to avoid, because you're not going to get much use out of a stitch going into a large space. When you come to the top, you can work your way around it. The beauty of sewing onto crochet is that the stitches just hold and disappear so nicely into the yarn. so you don't actually see the stitches. I'm coming down this side now. Can get the next one into position, ready to sew it down. If you have flattened your star a bit before you start sewing, then it will be a lot easier to place. Oops. So there you can see how neatly that one is lying on top of the square. I'm going to work my way around and I'll come back to let you see what it looks like once I have got all my points attached. There we are. I've come all the way around my square, my star, sorry, and it's firmly attached to the square and looking nice and flat. And there is how much of my yarn I've got left. So I would say probably about 18 inches of a tail will be enough to go around all the 5 points. And now all you need to do is to just give it a double stitch to finish off. Now I'm not going to go through to the back to finish this off because I've got a surprise for you. When I turn it over to the back, there are no stitches showing at all on the back. The thickness of the crochet is such that you don't, as you're picking up the dark grey when you're making your stitches, you don't tend to go right through to the very back. You'd have to be really pushing hard for your needle to go through to the back. So it's really perfect, really nice and neat. So I don't want to finish my silver yarn off on the back. So I'm just going to put a couple of little stitches in on the front. Just try if you can and pierce maybe one of the crochet stitches. That helps to hold everything and stops it coming out. And another little tip, once you've done a couple, you can run your needle through between the star and the background. Give it a good long sort of, what would you say, tail through the back. Pull it quite tight and snip it, and it will just disappear into the background. So there is a crochet square on a granny square background, and that is part of my cloud cover blanket. Again, there are lots of patterns on the internet for granny squares where the crochet star is part of the granny square. I decided I didn't want to do that in my blanket because I felt that it might change the tension of the square and pull the blanket slightly. So that was why mine is sewn on. But yeah, so that is a very simple crochet star. Bye.